La Chatham House, officiellement appelée Royal Institute of International Affairs, est un think tank basé à Londres, au Royaume-Uni. Fondée en 1920, elle se concentre sur les questions de politique internationale, notamment les relations internationales, la gouvernance mondiale, la sécurité, le développement durable, l'économie mondiale et d'autres défis mondiaux. Mission principale. 1. Production d'analyse et de recherche. La Chatham House publie des rapports, des études et des articles sur des enjeux internationaux majeurs. 2. Forum de discussion. Elle organise des conférences, des tables rondes et des séminaires où des experts, des décideurs politiques, des universitaires et des représentants d'organisations internationales débattent de sujets globaux. 3. Influence sur les politiques publiques. Par ses recommandations et ses analyses, elle cherche à influencer les politiques nationales et internationales. La règle de Chatham House. Une des spécificités les plus connues de cette organisation est la règle de Chatham House. Selon cette règle, lorsqu'une réunion est tenue sous son égide, les participants sont libres d'utiliser les informations échangées, mais l'identité des intervenants et leur affiliation ne peuvent pas être divulguées. Cela vise à encourager des discussions franches et ouvertes. Impact global. La Chatham House est reconnue mondialement comme une des institutions de recherche les plus influentes dans le domaine des affaires internationales. Elle attire des dirigeants politiques, des experts et des chercheurs de haut niveau, et son expertise est souvent sollicitée pour orienter les politiques internationales. La RDC à la Chatham House. La République démocratique du Congo, RDC, est confrontée à des défis de politique étrangère alors qu'elle gère une crise sécuritaire complexe et des tensions régionales, parallèlement à des partenariats économiques et commerciaux mondiaux. Le conflit persistant dans l'est de la RDC continue d'avoir des implications régionales plus larges. Les troupes déployées par la Communauté de développement de l'Afrique australe, SADC, doivent s'acquitter d'un mandat de plus en plus important, alors que la mission de maintien de la paix des Nations Unies s'apprête à se retirer. Les tensions avec le Rwanda restent également vives malgré les efforts de médiation déployés dans le cadre du processus de Luanda. En tant que producteur majeur de minéraux essentiels pour la transition énergétique mondiale, la RDC cherche à bénéficier de la demande internationale croissante sans sacrifier la valeur ajoutée. Les cadres nouveaux et existants avec les partenaires internationaux resteront essentiels à cette vision, y compris pour le développement de réseaux d'infrastructures régionaux tels que le corridor de Lobito. Lors de cet événement, Madame Thérèse Kayikwamba Wagner, ministre des Affaires étrangères de la RDC, discute de la diplomatie régionale et de l'Agence internationale de la RDC, y compris du positionnement du pays dans les chaînes d'approvisionnement mondiales en minerais essentiels.
Thanks for this very generous introduction. And of course, I want to thank Chatham House for having me here, and thank you for reminding me of the illustrious sequence of Congolese leaders who had already the opportunity to speak here at Chatham House. I think I have the added responsibility and burden probably of being one of the first women in such a position, so I'm very cognizant of that. I'd like to thank also all of the participants in person and of course online. I think this underscores the importance of our discussions here, but also underscores the importance of the interest that the Democratic Republic of the Congo continues to trigger both in the UK and certainly beyond, since we have an audience connecting live via the internet. I want first of all to emphasize the fact that my visit to the UK and also participating here in this discussion that we're going to have in a few moments inscribes itself in an effort to strengthen the ties between the two countries, strengthen the ties between the UK and the DRC that are long-reaching, far-reaching, but have a lot of potential that I think we can still tap into and harness further for the benefits of both countries and, of course, of both people. So as the topic already indicates, I want to talk today about the foreign policy objectives of the DRC, starting first of all with some key priorities that set the stage for us. First of all, it's about repositioning the DRC on the global stage. President Tshisekedi has been very upfront about this. He's our #1 diplomat and has been doing that in his first mandate, making sure that the DRC is more present, is more audible, is more visible on the international stage, beyond also some of our traditional areas of comfort. And this is something that I also take upon myself as one of my key responsibilities, making sure that we engage with more partners, with more stakeholders, and that we broaden our perspective, but also that we start taking up more space, not just on the map, but also in conversations that are so important. And so that means also expanding the scope of our diplomacy, going beyond the diplomacy that has been naturally dominated by the peace and security agenda, because our country, unfortunately, has been the center of one of the world's most horrendous humanitarian crises. This continues to be a priority for us, but it doesn't mean that this is all we have to offer as a DRC, also diplomatically speaking. So it means that in our diplomacy, we want to broaden the scope. We want to look at areas that go beyond peace and security conversations and that enable us to engage in conversations on economic diplomacy, environmental diplomacy, and of course, cultural diplomacy, where we have so much to offer, where we have been present, but have maybe not been showcasing our presence as much as we could. And this goes hand in hand, of course, with strengthening bilateral cooperation, but also multilateral cooperation. And so in this regard, as I said in the beginning, being here in the UK, it's one of my first visits in Europe, is a strong signal that we want to send to the United Kingdom. We want to strengthen our ties. We want to have stronger relationships with the UK, but also looking at multilateral cooperation. The DRC is being more assertive, is being more present. Starting, first of all, with the African Union Peace and Security Council. In its 20-year existence, this is the first time that the DRC is a member of the Council. And in a few days, we will be the president or chairing the Council for a 1-month period, which is something that we are looking forward to, because this gives us the opportunity, but also the responsibility of shaping our African peace and security architecture. Two other milestones that I want to highlight when it comes to multilateralism is our recent election to the United Nations Human Rights Council for a 2-year period, but also our candidacy for a non-permanent seat on the United Nations Security Council for 26-27, which has been endorsed by the AU. So I think these are some of the key tenets, but when we look at specific issues that we want to focus on when we're talking about our foreign policy, as I said in the beginning, peace and security, national sovereignty remain at the core of our efforts. The Democratic Republic of Congo, and I think the introduction already foreshadowed it, has always been at the center of a lot of discussions, a lot of interests, and rightly so, because we have so much to offer. But at the same time, this should never come at the cost of Congolese lives and never at the cost of principles that we hold all, not just the DRC, but all countries of the world, as the main tenets of international peaceful cohabitation. So territorial integrity, sovereignty remain at the core of our peace and security concerns, as well as the dignity of human lives. This brings us, of course, to the current situation in Eastern DRC, one characterized by the massive displacement of civilians, but more importantly, by the aggression that is carried out by the Rwandan Defense Forces with the support of the M23, an aggression that follows very clearly economic interests. When we look at the areas that are being controlled by the M23, there is a clear juxtaposition between the territorial conquest of the M23 and the riches that you find in these respective parts of North Kivu province. So peace and security remain at the core of our efforts, also to preserve the integrity of our country. Of course, critical minerals and the global energy transition is a bit of a buzzword that we hear or that we have been hearing in the past years. And this is one of the key areas where the DRC is at the heart of solutions. What we want to do here is to make sure that we are truly at the heart of solutions. That means re-examining value chains and making sure that we occupy much more space in those value chains. That means that when we have investors, when we engage in partnerships, bilateral, multilateral, public-private partnerships, it is about making sure that we no longer occupy the tiny space of being the place where natural resources are being extracted and taken away from, to being a broader space on that value chain where we add value to the minerals before they leave, where we add value to our human capital, where we add value also to our communities. And so it is a shift to make sure that the DRC is not just the starting point, but also occupies a space in these global discussions on global energy transition. The global energy transition cannot happen without the DRC. And so we will be part of that conversation throughout, not just the beginning, not just the middle, also the end. When it comes to other aspects such as environmental issues, again, these are things that we all know. The Congo Basin forest that is basically the second lung of the world, means that we occupy also a key role and a key position when it comes to global climate change and how we want to tackle these challenges. It means that the DRC also has to be more assertive when we engage in conversations with different stakeholders. We have the COP coming up in a few days or in a few weeks in Baku. And this is about the DRC also stepping its game up and saying we are contributing to reducing global emissions because of our natural endowment. What does that mean in a context where you have industrialized nations that are polluting much more? How do we make sure that we have an equal footing? That does not mean that for the sake of the totally legitimate worry of making sure that we manage climate change in a more sustainable way, we do not sell ourselves short. And most importantly, we do not sell the history or the potential and the aspirations of our populations short. Finally, no, it's not finally, I'm sorry. Regional economic integration. I think I'll be quite succinct on this, but I think it's very important also that the DRC with 9 borders does not perceive itself only in a relationship with the global north or with other poles, if you want, of the global economy, but also as a key motor in regional economic integration. And I think there are some very interesting and innovative projects on course, such as the Lobito corridor, but also the Tazama pipeline, which show to what extent the potential of countries coming together on the African continent can also boost and further local development and contribute to a greater democratization also and ripple effect that has positive impacts on civilian lives and on lives that otherwise might be marginalized, especially if they are not in traditional urban hubs. The last point, and this is one very dear to me, so last but really not least, soft power. And I think this is something that we have taken for granted for a very long time in the DRC, but that kind of comes with the territory. It's the swagger, it's the music, it's the way we dress, it's the fact that we are the biggest, not one of the biggest, but we are the biggest French-speaking country on the planet. So it's about us also valuing the people. And everything else that I said, when it comes to natural resources, when it comes to forests, when it comes to minerals, all lose their value if we do not invest in the human capital, if we do not invest in those that bring that swagger, in those that speak that French. And so one key aspect also of our foreign policy is to make sure that we engage in greater interaction between people, that we open up the DRC and its touristic potential to the world, and that we also, through that, build stronger and more resilient bridges to different partners and to different countries. So I think I hope I was not too long, and I think I've given you a rough overview. I really look forward to what was announced as a robust conversation. I guess I will find out what that means. And I look forward to double-clicking on some of the points that I mentioned, but also hearing your respective ideas, opinions. And again, thank you so much for your interest, and I look forward to the conversation.
Okay, so we have plenty of time, just under 45 minutes for a conversation, robust or not. So please go ahead and we'll go straight in. So gentlemen here, there's a microphone or not, or do our audience need to just speak very loudly? So front row here at the front, gentleman there. Yeah. No, there's a microphone coming. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. My name is Nick Haley, Executive Director of International Alert. We're a civil society organisation. Our largest team is in the east of DRC working with civil society on peace and security. If I may, could you say something about what I consider the very important role of civil society in the peace negotiations and processes that are underway at present, and how we can bring civil society more clearly into those processes? And I wonder, if I may, if you might also say a word about your government's policy with respect to MONUSCO's withdrawal, how that now feels, now the new government is settled in terms of the two remaining provinces. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see some other hands. I want to spread around the room, so the gentleman over there. Everybody, I think, will get a chance to ask a question.
Your Excellency, my name is Junior Badila. I'm a broadcaster at AUK Radio. We're based in the UK. We're based in Kinshasa as well. Quite interesting, you mentioned the relationship between Congo is one of the biggest French-speaking countries in the world. Currently, there is a debate in terms of DRC relationship with France and Francophonie, l'Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie. People are asking if Congo is going to pull out from OIF, Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie, because according to some of the views, the debate, that Francophonie has not achieved a lot in terms of peace and security in Congo. So what's your view on that? My last question is, because of the current conflict in Middle East, a lot of Africans are stranded in Lebanon, mostly in Beirut. And we've seen in the news Senegalese and Ivorian managed to pull out their citizens from Beirut. Few Congolese are stranded as well in Beirut. We've received a call from our Congolese citizens who are in Beirut. They even sent a message to the president, I think to the cabinet of the president, asking for help. So what's your position on that? Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to take one from online, and then that's it for the first round. Tia Gentil has asked, please, Excellency, unpack and expand on your point of re-examining value chains. What is the place to ensure that the Democratic Republic of Congo is adding value to critical minerals and not only being an exporter of minerals? That's one of the criticisms of the Libito project, for example, if I remember right. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you so much. I think I will just start with the first question. So when it comes to civil society organizations in the peace process, I think one added value that we have, especially when we look at the regional scope of the ongoing peace process, is that the DRC can pride itself on having a very dynamic and open society, where civil society actually weighs in very heavily on the peace process and is very vocal about it. This is something that we welcome. This is something that I welcome, where I consult and also maybe not in such an obvious manner, but make sure that I am always in touch also with what is being said by certain civil society organizations, and I think it's extremely important. I think the ongoing Rwanda process has been a very limited process in terms of participation, because also of, I believe, the concern of the facilitator to make sure that we have all the key stakeholders at the table deciding on these key issues. But at the same time, there is growing recognition that more voices need to be heard. On September 8th, I was in New York for the Security Council meeting on the Great Lakes region, and we welcomed the fact that many Security Council members, permanent and non-permanent members, actually emphasize the need to amplify the voices of women, of civil society, to make sure that the peace process is in tune with the realities on the ground, is in tune with what it is supposed to find solutions for. And therefore, we were extremely happy to see that a few weeks afterwards, the Angolan president hosted a group of women leaders, political actors, former heads of states, former women African heads of states from Liberia, Central African Republic, Ethiopia, but a lot of women leaders also from the Great Lakes region to engage in a conversation precisely about the peace process. And I think this was a watershed moment, if you want, through which women's voices were heard, and I think heard in such a way that the facilitation is, I believe, working on seeing how beyond a parallel track of conversations that has been maintained by different parties to various extents, is maybe further amplified and integrated to a certain extent. I don't want to be so bold to speculate about what shape that will take, but I think it was a very important signal to have this conversation happening at the level of the facilitator himself. And I also know that besides that meeting, there have been a lot of engagements with civil society organizations. On the point of MONUSCO, I think this is an issue that triggers a lot of interest, rightly so. MONUSCO is one of the oldest peacekeeping missions, if not currently the oldest peacekeeping mission on the African continent. And a few years ago, a roadmap for its withdrawal was drawn up, a roadmap that is broken down in 3 main elements, and it was a withdrawal that was sequenced in terms of provinces, starting with South Kivu province, and then going onwards to North Kivu and Ituri. I think we very successfully had a handover from MONUSCO to the Congolese authorities on 30th of June, when MONUSCO left South Kivu definitively. We have made sustained efforts, and we're continuing our efforts to make sure that the gains that were made through MONUSCO's presence are consolidated. And this is our focus in South Kivu, but also making sure that we draw the lessons from that withdrawal from MONUSCO and make sure that we apply them in a strategic manner and informed manner when we look at North Kivu and Ituri. The challenge that we face now with the sequence is obviously that the situation in North Kivu makes it extremely difficult to envisage a withdrawal of MONUSCO. MONUSCO is there with a Security Council mandate, of course, that is grounded in the concern that international peace and security are threatened, and it is a reality with the presence of over 4,000 Rwandan troops. It is undeniable. And so there is a need for a continued MONUSCO presence. There is also a need for a continued MONUSCO presence because MONUSCO has been mandated by the Security Council to provide logistical support to the SADC peacekeeping force that has come in support, the SAMI DRC. And so what we are working on and what we are looking at when we're thinking about the new MONUSCO mandate is to see how do we have an approach that does not lose the momentum of the withdrawal from South Kivu, but does not expose our population and our national territory, if you want, to an absence or to a premature absence and withdrawal of MONUSCO, which could have dramatic consequences. And I think this is the fine-tuning that needs to be done. The momentum has to remain, and the commitment of the Congolese government to see a withdrawal of MONUSCO happen is there, unchanged, but there is also a commitment to make sure that this is a withdrawal that is sequential, that is responsible, and that is sustainable. One point that the President emphasizes always when it comes to MONUSCO is to make sure that MONUSCO leaves in a dignified manner. As I said, it's one of the longest peacekeeping missions in the African continent, and it has been also a laboratory. I've worked for MONUSCO for a while, a laboratory that has transformed peacekeeping as we've seen it and known it elsewhere on the African continent. There have been innovations that came from MONUSCO, and that did not necessarily come from expatriates in MONUSCO, but actually from very smart Congolese people. So this is our heritage also, and this is why it's important to make sure that we have an exit of MONUSCO that is responsible, but that also celebrates the milestones and the contribution of the DRC through MONUSCO to international peace and security and its architecture. On the second question regarding the OEF, indeed, I think there is a very lively debate about our relationship with France, but also our relationship with the OEF, so the Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie. And I think what is important here is that as long as we are at the table, we have to shape the conversation. I do not want to foreshadow potential decisions on whether we stay within the OEF or not. But our weight, our importance as the largest Francophone country in the world is undeniable. And I think this is an asset that we need to continue using in a strategic manner, be it by shaping conversations when we are part of the discussion and when we are at the table, or I think Nina Simone said it, when love is no longer served or something like that, leave the table. I'm not sure we're there yet, but I think it is important to be cognizant of the weight that we carry and to use that to our advantage. And this is how we approach the situation or our relationship with OEF. And it means that we examine all the options to make sure that our weight, our contribution, our importance is duly recognized. The situation in the Middle East, and more specifically in Lebanon, I think one of the big challenges that we have in Lebanon is the fact that the DRC doesn't have an embassy. And so we have been facing considerable logistical challenges to facilitate the evacuation of Congolese citizens, but also of their Lebanese dependents. And this is something that we have been working on with our embassy in Egypt, with strong support also from our Egyptian counterparts. And it's work in progress, challenging logistics, extremely challenging because of the very volatile and unpredictable nature of the situation on the ground. But it is a priority for us, and it is something that the government is working on steadfastly to make sure that we manage to extract our people as soon as possible. We have a similar situation also with some students that have been affected by the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, and these are priorities and concerns that we have and need, of course, to take seriously in order to show up for our citizens wherever they are. The last question on adding value to value chains. Mm-hmm. Right? I think this is, this is a paradigm shift, if you want, that the government wants to embrace and make sure that it is embedded in all our relationships. So if you look at the mining industry in the DRC under previous administrations, as I said, extremely limited and very much limited to the extraction bit of the process. And so one priority for us when we engage with new partners, with new investors, wherever they come from, and I know there's a lot of scrutiny about where they come from, but wherever they come from, it is to make sure that our interests are safeguarded. And that includes making sure that we do not remain in this pattern of just being the repository of natural resources that can be extracted in an absence of transparency, in an absence of accountability, and especially in an absence of, positive impact for the communities that surround those mining sites. And so when it comes to, for example, the recent FOCAC, participation of the DRC. This is something where the president has been very transparent about with all our partners. Yes, you can extract natural resources, but invest in human capital, invest in transformation, make sure that, we break out of this cycle and out of this pattern. It is an adaptation, it is an adjustment. It also means that it is greater responsibility unto the Congolese government to make sure that we create also the environment for those ambitions to come to fruition. But it is a valid ambition, and it is one that will pay out for our population and on the long run make sure that we are part of the conversation, as I said.
Great. So